into some interesting urban exploration. And for today's adventure, we actually have a location that has a little bit of a twist to it. It has an alleged paranormal background to it as well, so that'll be fun to check out. And I actually had a personal experience of my own one of the times I came here that I will share as well. So we'll see what we can get into with it today, see what happens. As you can hear, it's a very active spot. So, give you a gander of what we got going on here. We will actually be on our way to what is known as the Brooksbrae Terracotta Factory. It is an abandoned brick factory located way out in the middle of nowhere in the Pine Barrens. And as always, you can tell that you're in the right location when seeking something of urban legend or abandoned atmosphere when you find the one random spot in the road that is just covered with graffiti. It's almost like the X marks the spot on the map. And following this paint breadcrumb trail, which will lead you right over those railroad tracks. So let's head on over. So as you look ahead, you can really see that the other people who've made the pilgrimage out to this site have kind of made it very easy to find your way, as that graffiti trail isn't just limited to the road. It actually will lead its way all the way to the spot. Kind of gives this a Wonderland-esque kind of feel to it. Everything being painted in a different color. Then also to that point, it is also eerily quiet here. Yes, here, as that says. So that does seem to be the case in a lot of places within the Pine Barrens. Just tons of silence, not so much any of the regular wildlife sounds one would hear. Nothing but, of course, the roar of all of the trucks passing by out there on the road. And we've arrived. Something I've always found kind of cool in these spots here out in the Pine Barrens too. These seemingly desert plants that people have randomly planted that thrive in these conditions. Despite the only thing it has in common with the desert out here being sandy. But let's have a go around, check it out. In 1905, the Adams Clay Mining Company incorporated the Brooksbrae Terracotta Factory to produce bricks from the clay they pulled from the earth. For its time, the factory would be state-of-the-art, capable of producing thousands of bricks in a single day. Unfortunately, the factory's full potential would never be known, as its owner, William Kelly, would die during construction, and the facility would not be completed. The building would sit vacant for years while litigation would ensue to determine what would become of it. During this time, tensions with the Central Railroad would arise. Workers would go on strike, many of them setting up operation in close proximity to the factory. The worried agents who controlled the Brooksbrae estate feared the angry workers would take out their frustrations on the vacant building. To try to ensure its safety, they would hire a caretaker. Enter Jonas and Catherine, a Polish couple from Philadelphia hired by the Brooksbrae company to reside in a house on the property to look over the factory. This, however, would prove to create more of a problem than a solution. The striking workers, already on a warpath, had been taking out their frustration on the tracks, hoping to impede the railroad progression in the area. The particular area they had been attacking was merely a couple hundred yards away from the factory, and it was only a matter of time before the factory became a target for their destruction. This would lead to disputes between Jonas and the rail workers. He was intent to do the job he was hired for and keep the building safe from any vandalism at their hands. The resentment would raise to a higher level, especially after it was surmised by the workers that Jonas and Catherine were in possession of a lot of money. The majority of them, already poor and frustrated from the strike, found a new direction to focus their anger in. Jonas, the man who had wealth that they did not, the man they viewed as a new enemy that they believe aligned himself with the railway and impeded on their destructive protests. The tension would come to a climax one cold September night, when it is believed a few of the rail workers would break into Jonas and Catherine's home. They would proceed to murder the caretaker and his wife, steal all of their money, and set the home and factory ablaze to dispose of the evidence. The fire would not be discovered until the following morning, when workers on their way to a nearby cranberry bog would see a huge plume of smoke rising into the sky. They immediately sent for help, but it was already too late. Jonas and Catherine were dead. All that remained of Brooksbrae were the charred ruins of the foundation. The local state trooper that would investigate the fire, who also happened to be a railroad strike sympathizer, would deem the fire to be accidental. He would claim the fire was caused by a clogged chimney flue and that there was no evidence of foul play. As a result, no one had ever faced punishment for the murder of the Brooksbrae caretakers. By 1918, William Kelly's will would finally be settled, allowing the property to be sold. But by then, there was not much left of Brooksbrae. The factory had been reduced to collapsing walls set over a narrow underground tunnel system. Nothing would be done with the charred remains of the building, but this would be far from the end of the tragedies to take place here. About 10 years after the murder of Jonas and Catherine, Brooksbrae would once again see a killing. It is said a violent drifter would lurk in the area of the factory. One day, an unfortunate woman would cross paths with him and be abducted. He dragged his poor victim back to the factory and brought her down into the tunnels, doing horrible, unspeakable things to her until ultimately killing her. In a sick twist of irony, just like the first people to be murdered at Brooksbrae, the drifter would set the corpse of his victim on fire to dispose of the evidence before fleeing the area and evading capture. Now, with 2 murders having happened here, it was believed by the locals that the ruins were cursed and haunted by the souls of those who had perished there. It would be a few decades before death would again make its presence known in Brooksbrae. Legend has it that a deranged school bus driver would finally lose his grip on sanity one day and launch his bus into the woods, making his way to the factory. It is believed that he had taken the bus full of children to the ruins and murdered them all. But in a bizarre twist, neither he nor the bodies of the children were ever found. Only the empty bus, covered in blood on the inside, was pulled from the grounds of the factory. In modern times, the ruins continue to rot in the forest, the walls now serving as a canvas for graffiti, its tunnels and foundations used for late-night parties and bonfires. But the unrest spirits of the people who lost their lives here often make their presence known. Disembodied screams on occasion will tear through the silence of the surrounding forest, and dark, shadowy figures can be seen disappearing around the corners of the walls. Perhaps even more unsettling is the nauseating smell of burnt flesh that has been said to come and go when inside of the tunnels. The tunnels, as it would turn out, would be where I had my own bizarre experience at Brooksbrae. It was my first time visiting the factory in the summer of 2021. Upon arrival, nothing had struck me as out of the ordinary, aside from the complete and utter silence surrounding the place. I made my way through the foundation, observing what had been left of the walls and taking pictures. I noticed 3 different entrances to the tunnels and decided to save those for last after I had explored the outside. I made my way up around the back and along the above-ground tunnels. The tops of 2 of them had collapsed, but the one on the end only had half of its roof come down. I came around the side, planning to enter into the half tunnel at the end, and that is when it hit me. A horrible, putrid smell. It smelled like roadkill that had been festering in the hot summer sun for days. The powerful odor permeated the air and seemed to be coming from within the tunnel I was about to enter. I took a step inside, and that's when the next thing would assault my senses, a buzzing sound. I quickly identified the sound, though, as it was the buzzing of thousands, if not millions, of flies. It made sense, with the smell of death hanging so heavily in the air, that there would be flies. However, what did not make sense was that there was seemingly no source for neither the smell nor the sound of the flies, both of which were being amplified by the tunnel. I saw nothing to explain where any of this was coming from, that is, until I looked down. Beneath my feet, I could see square holes in the ground, holes that led into the underground tunnels. I shined my phone's flashlight into the holes and could indeed see a flurry of green blowflies swarming beneath my feet. Curiosity getting the best of me, I had to know what was down there. I came out of the tunnel and made my way around to the entrance for the underground one that lined up to where I just was. The nauseating stench of death billowed out of the tunnel at me, and even from the outside I could see millions of flies in the tunnel. I took a deep breath, intending to hold it for as long as possible, and made my way inside. I was instantly bombarded as soon as I entered the tunnel. The swarm of flies was overwhelming, pelting my face, hitting me in the eyes, and going into my nose and ears. Involuntarily, I let the breath I was holding go and was instantly overtaken by the smell. I gagged on the putrid odor and ended up with flies in my mouth as well. I had no choice. I turned around and crawled back out of the tunnel, gagging and vomiting from the mixture of the stench and the flies that had rushed into my mouth. I staggered away from it, figuring I was going to have to call the authorities to investigate, since I could not get past the flies. That is when I noticed something peculiar. Everything around me was dead silent once again. The buzzing sound from all the flies had ceased. I turned back around to face the tunnel and saw it was empty. Where just moments prior a cloud of blowflies had driven me out of the tunnel, there was now nothing. I peeked my head back inside and found that the once overpowering smell of death was now also gone. Confused and unnerved, I crawled back inside and shined my light down every side tunnel and made my way to the end. But ultimately, all I would find is empty spray paint cans and beer bottles. I expected, or maybe I should say hoped, to at least find the carcass of an animal inside and provide a benign explanation for everything that had just occurred. But that was not the case. In the end, I would leave with more questions than I would answers. Well, as you can see, these tunnels are a bit of a tight squeeze, but there you have it. The Brooksbrae brick factory. So, until next time, thanks for watching.